here in Phoenix, Arizona, and we're going to be interviewing this afternoon, or this evening I should say, one of my old-time buddies. We're New York pals, we're from the same hood. Antonio Huneeus, who just recently made the transition from Manhattan to Arizona. And I'm sure it was a physical feat to get here, and a difference in temperature, as he'll find out this summer when the thermometer hits well over 100. So Antonio, I haven't seen you now in a couple of years at least, right?
Yeah.
The last report that we had of you, you were headed back to Chile, but I guess you never quite made it.
I never made it.
Yeah. And what have you, in a nutshell, what have you been doing in those few years that I haven't seen you? You used to write for UFO Universe, and you were very, very active in the UFO field, and then you kind of dropped out for at least a little while, but now you're re-emerging like the Phoenix.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you know, I was very active in the 90s, and I was writing for your publications and Fate. I used to do the UFO column in Fate magazine. And then came, and this I guess is appropriate for a conspiracy journal, something called 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
And it completely kind of killed the UFO field. I mean, economically, if
Yes.
you want to try to make a living. And I had been there so long that I kind of needed a break. And if I couldn't make money, even though I never made almost any money anyway, as you know, you want to get rich, don't go into UFOs.
Yeah, no.
But I never.
Not one of your 10 top occupations. They don't have them. The guidance counselor doesn't tell you to become a ufologist. Or a writer, probably.
Or a writer, right.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, so long as I could pay rent or something, at least justified it. But then I couldn't, so I kind of dropped out. I needed a break. I did some other things, but and I moved out of New York, not immediately to Phoenix, but I was in Northern Virginia for about 3 years. I was going to go to Chile, but somehow things kept happening, and I never made it. I did go to South America for one kind of long, extended trip in 2006, but I was in Ecuador. I have a sister there. I have some family in Ecuador. And then I came back to New York, and again, other things happened, and I sort of never made it. I was kind of big for my time. I wasn't really doing anything.
For our the folks out there who are not familiar with your background, outside of Scott Corrales, you probably have written more, maybe more than he has even, on UFO incidents and encounters and strange happenings throughout South America.
Yeah.
Not just Chile, although you've certainly written about that as well. And you've lectured, I understand, in a few South American countries?
Oh, yeah. Well, I was just recently in Mexico City at the big UFO summit there that Jaime, my son, sponsored. And yeah, I've lectured in Argentina, Brazil, Chile, of course, many times, and a few other places. And but of course, as you yourself remember, you published one of my books about UFOs in Russia.
Yes, you're a globalist.
Yeah.
You could say you're a globalist.
But I started
right?
with South America, and then I kind of expanded into the different parts of the world. I did a lot of business with the Japanese at one time in the 90s. But to round back to what you asked me in the beginning, so then eventually what happened is, like I said, I was kind of, well, making a living but not really doing much. And then I heard that there was a new company in Phoenix, or in Tempe actually, but in the Phoenix area, called Open Minds Production. And that they were hiring people, journalists, who had an international background in UFOs. I mean, if I had in my wildest dream come up with a fantasy job that would not happen, that was it, you know.
Well, you had also worked for, was it Lawrence Rockefeller?
Yeah, indirectly. Yeah. What I did is, in fact, I sent John Reo, which is our boss at Open Minds, I did send him a copy. Yeah, I was a co-author of the UFO briefing document. That was probably one of my most famous production, until maybe now Open Minds will overshadow it, but for many years. And I worked there with Marie Galbraith, who was the wife of the American ambassador to Paris during Ronald Reagan. So she was not your run-of-the-mill ufologist. She was very well connected. And in fact, the other lady, who was a very close friend of mine, who recently, unfortunately, passed away, Sandy Wright. You probably heard of her, the BSW Foundation.
Yeah.
She was a wonderful person. She was a friend of John Keel,
yes.
Ingo Swann, and all that. She used to live in New York. And these ladies contacted me in the 90s when I was working for the Japanese with our friend Masahiro Kahata with the IBDA, you know, the brainwave machine, who's a Japanese-American ufologist and psychic investigator. So I ended up actually being the co-author for that report. Don Berliner had written the original manuscript, but
you polished it.
I polished it, and I added a lot of international things because, well, he had some international things, but he didn't read French or Spanish or Portuguese, so he was basing it on second or third-hand sources. I could read on the original.
Didn't this recently all reemerge because Hillary, Hillary Clinton, who of course is now the
Secretary of
State, right, was photographed to carry walking with Lawrence Rockefeller and carrying the initiative or some other volume.
No, what she's carrying, for years. Originally, these photos were released by the Clinton Presidential Library, but I think the first copies were, the resolution was low or small. So you could see at that time the First Lady walking on a wooded path with Lawrence Rockefeller, and she was obviously carrying a book, but it's upside down on the back. So the resolution was too low. It used to be a game with people like Steve Bassett or whatever, try to discover which book it is. Finally,
I wish it were one of mine.
Right, yeah, it would have been great PR. Finally, what happened is this guy, I forget his name right now, but he's connected to the Open Minds Forum, which is not connected to us, although people mistaken it because of the name. He's the one that finally discovered it, but then it was through our website that we publicized this, that in fact the book that Hillary was carrying was, is there, I think it's called, Is There Intelligent Life, or something like that. It's by a famous physicist called Paul Davids.
Not to be confused with our friend Paul Davids.
not the Russell
He wishes
guy.
too,
Yeah, he wishes. This guy is top of the line, you know. And in fact, he's a professor at ASU, Arizona State University, in Tempe, even though he's originally Australian, trained in London.
You're going to interview him for the magazine?
Well, we actually interviewed him for the radio already. Alejandro Rojas, our colleague, did.
Does he believe in UFOs?
Not really. No. He was recently at that conference that got a lot of publicity in the Vatican, the Astrobiology Study Week. He was one of the top scientists there. But oddly enough, though, he recently got a lot of publicity because even though he's a totally mainstream scientist, but he was criticizing SETI for, I guess, their lack of results or whatever. So he's a little different, like he's a little bit more independent. Also, I understand that in this book, which is the one that Hillary is carrying, we cannot prove 100% this, but we're pretty sure that what happened is that Rockefeller gave her the book. That's why she's carrying it.
Oh, yes,
why would she carry it otherwise?
And
it's the type of book, if you knew Rockefeller,
you start off slow.
Philosophical, but mainstream at the same time, you know, perfect gift for her. We don't know if she read it or not, but whatever. Also,
she wants to read a good contactee book, and you give her some scientific.
Right. Plus, at that time, he was a best-selling author, so it would have been normal for Rockefeller to give her that book.
Did he comment on it?
No.
No.
He never did comment on it. He was very reserved. The only time he even wrote something on UFOs, I mean, of course, the files are available now at the Clinton White House, and Grant Cameron has them on his website, and so is Steve Bassett. So now we can document all the steps of the Rockefeller Initiative, and it's kind of great, satisfaction for me that actually my name does appear in those White House documents indirectly. They keep mentioning Marie Galbraith because she's, the socialite, but they included the title page of our book, and there's my name. So I'm an official White House files for whatever.
Well, now. Okay, so you're a globalist as far as the UFOs go. What would you say is the main difference, if any, between the activity? Let's start out first with South America and then here in North America. Is there a difference in the sightings, the creatures?
No, I would say the general patterns of the UFO phenomenon are actually quite similar. Although there are slightly differences, but they're quite similar regardless whether it's China or South America or Russia or whatever. Where the differences sometimes arose is in the sort of the sociological impact that this phenomenon has on the culture, on the local culture. So in some countries, like in Latin American countries, the media, for instance, is very kind of, UFOs are not a big deal. I mean, if the UFOs happen over a big city, they'll be front page on the newspapers, or they'll appear on TV or something. It's not something that is hush-hushed. So those kinds of differences do exist. But the phenomenon itself, I would say, is pretty consistent, except in the way it's treated. So sometimes there are differences in the way it's treated. But it seems to me one of the things that convinced me when I got started on this phenomenon, which was over 30 years now, is that it happens everywhere. And it doesn't matter the country. Even Iran, places that have the Islamic culture.
Of course, in fact, Iran, they took one of my book on MJ12, believe it or not, and I read Hangar 18, which you worked on. There is an Iranian edition. Yes, well, I'm sure the fellow is now in the, some Iranian prison for years ago. But this is before the overthrow. Yeah. But
well, actually, for the Islamic countries, oddly enough, they got less problems with the phenomenon that, let's say, even the Christian cultures, because in the Islam, they have a thing which is part of their culture and their religion called the jinn. And these are like tricksters, they actually abduct people and they teletransport and do things like UFO occupants do. So whenever you have an Islamic guy a researcher from an Islamic country, immediately he makes a relationship. He says, okay, this is not so different from what's in the Quran.
Right.
So again, you got different treatments. But going back to your original question, so what happened is basically I got hired by this company, Open Minds. And it was, like I said, like a fantasy job. I mean, a real salary, working as a real journalist, like if you were working for CNN or whatever, but doing UFOs full-time with, guaranteed salary, medical benefits. It works,
Even if an alien abduction?
I guess so. So I sent him a big resume, including the briefing document. I had to fly for a job interview. Because the one condition is I had to move to Arizona.
Yeah.
And of course I had never lived in the West. I had been visiting many times.
I saw your cowboy boots on the way over here.
Well, it was for your conference, the first time I ever came to, and it was Phoenix.
Yes.
It's funny how things kind of weave in life, because Phoenix was the first city in the West that I ever came, and now I'm living here. Then I went to California and New Mexico, whatever. But originally,
you've lectured all over the
all
world
over
now.
the world. Yeah, Japan, Europe, South America.
So
everywhere.
Okay, let's just take a couple of countries at random. Chile. Give us like 2 or 3 incidents, if you can recall. A minor detail.
Well, I mean, of course,
the day the Earth stood still. Or
yeah, remember that one? The day Santiago stood still.
That's right.
Yeah, that was an interesting case. That happened in I think it was 1985, and people later became familiar with the Phoenix lights. If anything, it's similar to the Phoenix lights, except there was more footage on the Phoenix lights. But there was some footage on this one too, and it estimated at the time that about 2 million people saw these things.
And it was high noon.
It's high noon, right? Daytime, 2 objects
reported
in the sky.
on the front page of the newspaper.
Front page on the national TV. This was still the days of the military dictatorship in Chile, but it was all over the media, everything. And I wasn't there, unfortunately, so I didn't see them, but I came shortly after that, because at that time my parents were still alive, and I used to go to Chile usually once a year, and I had a representative in Chile that would arrange lectures for me. And boy, that was one of the most successful days for me, but in part it was because of this incident. That place, we hired a room in a hotel in downtown Santiago. We did it right. This guy knew PR. We went to every radio station, newspaper, press releases, everything. The room was for 300 people. We could get additional chairs for 200 more people. We had 700 people. And we had to turn people away, and we had to create a second appearance on another day to satisfy those people. So imagine. The TV cameras were there. It was a big deal. It's like, well, I was lecturing 2-3 months after this incident, and there were no professional ufologists in Chile at the time. There were some contactees or some people at the government, but the government was not releasing what they were doing. So basically, after me, yes, we did create a move on Chile, and slowly, now there's tons of ufologists in Chile. But back then, so I'm a pioneer.
But you mentioned there are contactees in Chile.
Yeah, although the contactees were not so much Chilean, there were some contactees Chilean, of course, but there were mostly more famous ones like Sixto Pazos.
He's all over the place.
Yeah, they would have like franchises or whatever. Followers.
Yeah.
Siragusa, the Italian contactee, he was big in Latin America, and so on. So it was weird. Whenever there was a famous incident, let's say Ben Waters or something, the media didn't have anyone to go, so they would go to the contactees. But then that changed in the 80s, and then who followed?
Who's the big mucky muck of Chile now?
I would say the guy that I know the best is Rodrigo Fuenzalida. He's a nice guy. But in Chile also has a government investigation, actually.
Is this one of the countries that's
few countries that have, they created a small office connected to the air traffic control office, or the civil aviation. It would be like the FAA had a UFO department. They don't call it UFO, they call it anomalous phenomena, whatever, but basically that's what it is. And they have a retired Air Force general in charge of that, whom I know. They're quite open. If you go to Chile, or any ufologist that goes to Chile, usually they invite you to lunch and everything.
Big budget.
They really don't have much of a budget. I guess they have.
Well, I don't think any of these, even like England, what was their budget?
Well,
the UK,
in England it was ridiculous. When the MOD closed their investigation, they said they were doing it for money, and their budget was like £70,000. I mean, for a miniature defense of a Western country.
Nick Pope is probably making more money now than when he worked at
the. So they didn't cut it for money.
Okay, Brazil. We got to bring a trunk. Let's bring the trunk in.
I was in Brazil. Unfortunately, I haven't been back in Brazil in
AJ is a friend of AJ.
I even stayed in AJ's house, as a matter of fact, in the 80s. Brazil is one of the countries with richest UFO phenomena.
Lots of occupants.
Abductions, government documents, UFO
physical evidence,
UFO attacks. People that think that UFO aliens are nice, they're going to save the planet, and maybe some will. But I'm open-minded to anything. But in Brazil, if you go to the north, and we publish this in UFO
of course we did, yes.
And there you have this phenomena called the chupas. Not to be confused with the chupacabras. That's a different thing.
Right.
Chupas are these suckers, basically. That's what the word means.
Yes.
And they're nasty things, and they attack people in these remote areas of the Amazon. And as Jevaer now has obtained the documents, the Brazilian Air Force created a whole project called Operation Prato, Operation Saucer, because there was panic. Even the sheriff had run out of these towns, so there was everybody was freaking out. So basically the Air Force came to actually help people and try to calm the situation. And
I know the History Channel did a special, and of course they used to correspond with Bob Pratt.
Correct.
Who had been down to Brazil many
Pratt
times.
was like 11 times, the late Bob Pratt.
But yet it's eased off.
It's eased off. This was in the 70s,
right.
But there were still some incidents in the 80s, maybe even in the 90s. And of course, the other one that was interested in this phenomenon in Brazil was Valle, and he wrote it down in Confrontations, in his book Confrontations. But at that time, the report was a rumor. I mean, people had said there was this report, but there was no proof. Now we actually have the report. And if you go to Jevaer's website, you can download it. If you read Portuguese.
This will be in the book Disclosure of the Sean Castillo.
So Brazil is fascinating. Now you want to go all the countries. Russia was, which again, we did that book which you published, which at the time was kind of pioneering because nobody had done it. And in fact, when our book came out, it was still called the Soviet Union.
That's right. 2 weeks later,
gone. But Russia, what happened is when Gorbachev came to power and opened up the controls, we knew there were UFOs in Russia, of course.
There were some.
You
know, there was a little digest magazine called Sputnik. When I was 15 years old, they published a letter of mine with my address. I think I got 2 letters I couldn't read, but. They were open. There was a nice little magazine. Ancient Astronauts.
There was some culture of it, but it was still pretty repressed. And when Glasnost came, that policy of openness, then the Russian media went crazy with UFOs, and they were just even the more staid newspapers like Pravda, whatever, they were all jumping.
Oh, Pravda now is
it's
like the Weekly World News.
Hot babes, of course, the one case that got tremendous publicity was one of the few cases that made front page in the New York Times.
Yes.
You were quoted.
I'm quoted in there.
Was the Voronezh.
That's right.
The Voronezh Close Encounter of the Third Kind.
Well, I think Peter Robbins has been putting together some material
I saw one of his presentations in Crash Retrievals. So at the one in Las Vegas, So Russia has fascinating cases, and but everywhere, China, which for many years we didn't know anything. Then eventually they opened up too, and now I've met Sun Shi Li, Professor Sun Shi Li, who's a very distinguished man. This is the only ufologist that has appeared both on the front page of the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. He has to come from China because no American ever made it there. But he's a very nice guy. His background is very fascinating because, that's the reason I could interview him and talk to him at length. He was a Spanish linguist. And he used to be, and actually I have a photo that he gave me, he used to be Chairman Mao's interpreter for Spanish.
Oh, yeah.
So if you had, let's say, the president of Uruguay visiting China, and there is a picture that he gave me, I think it's the head of the Uruguayan Communist Party.
Yes.
And you see Chairman Mao, this guy, whatever his name is, and a young Sun Xili. And it was because of that he was working for the Chinese Foreign Office and the propaganda magazines and all that in the Spanish section. And he got a book by a researcher from Spain who passed away now called Faber Kaiser. It was basically an ancient astronaut book. At the time when there was nothing in China. The guy read the book from cover to cover and instantly became an expert because nobody knew anything about UFOs in China. So now he was being invited to lecture at universities and everything. And that's how eventually the Chinese put this thing called CURO, China UFO Research Organization, which is not open to the real public. Otherwise, it would have like 3 million people.
Millions.
You have to be like an engineer and everything. They're still the largest in the world. You know, people. MUFON always claims they are. No, MUFON has 3,000. These people have 30,000. Because China is a big place. So again, China has lots of cases. I cannot think of a single country that has no UFO case.
No, even the most remote African country, or
sooner or later you hear. When, for instance, Ecuador, there's some countries that for some reason don't have a UFO subculture, meaning that they don't have magazines, they don't have UFO organizations. Ecuador, for some reason, is one of those. No UFO magazines, no groups, nothing. However, I have family there, as I mentioned earlier. When you're talking with people socially, you go to whatever, to my sister lives there, so I may be at a dinner party, something, and people know that you are into UFOs, then you start hearing anecdotally cases. Oh, when I was a student of medicine in the 1960s, I had a sighting, and so on. So but they had nowhere to report. The media will report occasionally, but that's it, you know. I heard of fascinating cases through my own personal context of my family, relatives, of a guy who's a very rich guy. In fact, he later was ambassador of Ecuador in Washington, very prominent guy. His family had this big farm in some area, some tropical area. And there was a Dutch guy who was overseer. And this case, I don't know when it would have happened, probably around in the 60s. Certainly in the 60s, maybe 64, somewhere like that. And supposedly there was a big UFO landing there, and a lot of the workers, the peasants saw it, and this guy saw it. So there you have a case. Does it exist in the UFO literature? No, because it was never reported. It didn't happen officially. It didn't happen in a big city, so it didn't make it to the press. But we have it from a very good source. A guy who was ambassador of Ecuador in Washington, who didn't see himself, but knew the Dutch guy who was the overseer, and he said there were probably about 30 people who were the witnesses. With landing, everything, the whole thing, the whole.
Any aliens come in?
I don't remember that.
Aliens, I mean, you know,
occupants.
Occupants, yeah.
Oh, do you remember they used to call that term is totally out of fashion now, the UFO-nauts?
Well, actually, you know, it was a writer for our Interplanetary News Service report. There was a Catholic priest by the name of Reverend Guy J. Sear, and he came up with a list of like 100 UFO terms. It's the only one. The Catholic priest. The Catholic. He used to write. Reverend Guy J. Sear, CYR. He was up in New England. He used to write articles for us, and that was his term. So don't anybody fool you. Yes, I can show you.
Well, of course, you know, we have, in fact, on the next issue of Open Minds, we have of the magazine. We have the cover story, which I wrote on the Vatican.
Yes.
On the Vatican. Not just on we do a whole historical thing, not just on the recent statements by the astronomers from the Vatican Observatory. What was very interesting is that about 2 years ago, in 2008, the Osservatorio Romano, which is the official newspaper of the Vatican, the official voice of the Catholic Church, published a famous interview with Funes, who is the director of the Vatican Observatory, who comes from Argentina. And you know what was the title of the article? The Extraterrestrial is My Brother. It was like a clear statement, you know. Like,
Well, if I put a cover line like that on the magazine, I'd be... yeah.
But what we discuss in this article is not just that, you know, in other statements like that conference that happened in Rome recently at the Vatican, where that same scientist, Paul Davids, that we
Yes,
were,
yes.
he was there. But we also talk about the Vatican ufologists, of which the most famous was Balducci, Monsignor
Yes.
Balducci, which you might have met, or maybe not.
No, I didn't, but I
you
certainly heard the talk.
I knew him. Of course, the difference between the so-called Vatican ufologists and the Vatican astronomers is that the Vatican ufologists were not official. Even Balducci always said even though he got always misquoted, later, you know, everybody would say, Vatican says, you know, he would always say, no, this is my opinion. I'm not talking for the Vatican.
But he was a priest?
He was the chief demonologist for the Vatican.
Yeah.
So he's
Demonologist?
Yes. I still have his card. And his card says, Monsignor Corrado Balducci, theologian / demonologist.
That's a better job than yours, I think.
However, Mauricio Bayata,
Yes.
my co-worker, you know, at Open Minds,
Yes.
he said that later the Monsignor printed a new card that
Yes.
said demonologist / ufologist.
Yeah. Well, I hope he didn't lump them both together.
No.
No.
The interesting thing about Balducci is, and of course, he was an expert on demons. If anybody's you know, he was the Vatican exorcist. I mean, he knew as much as anybody. But he always said that that they were not related. That, in his opinion, anyway.
Now,
because he said, his comment was interesting. He said, demons and angels don't need machines to travel between A and B. You know, they just teleport on themselves. They don't need a machine like UFOs. So, in his opinion, they were extraterrestrial. And but that creates problems in the Catholic dogma, which is what I'll discuss in not only my article, but we have an article by Dan Sheehan too. You know, the famous attorney, was John Mack's attorney, and he was an attorney for the Jesuits. Interesting. So he's got good connections with the Catholic Church. His article is more philosophical. What are the implications? Mine is more just like the facts, you know, this is what this astronomer said, or I talk about sightings in Rome too. There were many sightings.
There was one, the River Pinati.
Remember when they formed the cross?
You know, I've been trying to find where that, the original article was in Ray Palmer's magazine years and years ago. I don't know whether he's still alive or not.
It was published in Flying Saucer Review.
Yeah.
The original, well, not the original was in Italian.
Yeah, right.
This came from, not Pinotti, Pinotti was later publicized, but Perego, Alberto Perego.
What about 1954?
1954, who was a diplomat.
What a memory.
Yeah, he's got a good memory.
Can't remember where my keys are, but...
Well, in this article, we also, not only we mentioned that case, we have the diagrams.
Yeah.
We even have...
Oh, I remember the diagrams, yeah. Well, you know, I was recently at the Vatican. In fact, I produced a DVD that's out now. It's called Secrets of the Vatican. The Vatican. I took my little camera and shot a lot of the footage there, the secret library and so forth. And we talk about some of the scandals that have gone. But the thing that really intrigued me the most, that really puzzled me, when you walk through the Vatican, you know, you go from one church to another, one hallway to another. Out in the Vatican courtyard, there is this giant globe that's maybe 10 feet by 10 feet. And I'm looking at this and I say, well, what in the heck is this doing here? And then it dawned on me, it looks exactly like this painting from the, I guess, 14th century.
No,
that's
is that like the Sputnik one?
Sputnik.
Yeah, that is from the early 1600s.
1600s, okay. And it's in a church painted on a chapel.
Church near Padua somewhere.
Yeah. And in fact, they have a website inviting everybody to come in. And I say to myself, well, this darn well looks like that in the church.
The painter of that is called Salim Beni. Yeah, it's a remarkable painting.
That was, you know, where I first saw that? In Sputnik, the Russian magazine.
Yep. Yeah, oddly enough, the Russians, now we're talking of the way old days, Soviet days, there was one theory, the modern UFOs, they were a little leery about that, because obviously they had no control of what these things did. But there was one theory they kind of liked, and that was the ancient astronauts. Because long before von Daniken, who he was just in Mexico City, and he's still kicking around and giving his lectures and everything. But long before von Daniken, there was a whole school of Russian Soviets back in those days. Kazantsev, Agrest.
Agrest, I actually had a couple of letters from him, right? He spoke English. In fact, he wrote a manuscript or a book that was never published. They wanted me to publish it, but it was in such bad English. And at the age of 15, I had some editorial problems.
Yeah,
and you had to retype everything.
Yeah,
I mean, from scratch. It was like you could scan it and correct it.
I think the reason that the Soviets, at that time, the Soviet ideology, liked the ancient astronaut theory because it took religion away from a lot of these, you know, okay, now you could talk about ancient gods or whatever. They were aliens, you know, they were not real gods.
That's right.
So that was, I think, that's why that was allowed to such an extent, because there was certainly many, many books and articles published under Soviet days. So anyway, there's all kinds of things.
Okay, Scandinavian countries, plenty of
reports. Oh, yeah.
Norway, going back to what, 1908 or something.
Yeah. And also you had the stuff that used to, John Keel, the late John Keel used to be fascinated, the USOs, remember?
Yes, that's right, and ghost rockets.
They had them trapped and everything, and then they would disappear.
You know what you got to tell us? Mussolini.
Oh, yeah.
Now, is this true?
As far as I know, it is true. And this, to just get people into, explain a little bit what it is, in the late 90s, some documents were mailed to, I think, again, Pinotti and a couple of other people. So it's a little bit like MJ-12. The difference with MJ-12 is crucial, though. The documents were the original. They were not photographs or photocopies, but they were actual paper. So these guys did it right. They kept the investigation very, very quiet. And what they did is they engaged some forensic experts attached to the Italian Ministry of Justice. I met the guy. I used to go to the San Marino Symposium, which is this little independent republic in the middle of Italy. They had a wonderful UFO symposium. They still do, but in the 90s it was big budget, so they would bring people from all over the world. And I met the guy there. His name is Antonio Garaviglia. Couldn't care less about ufology. That was not his thing. He was just hired to look at these papers, tell me if they're forged or real or not. And the guy basically, they did the chemical analysis of the paper, the ink, and all that, and also the style, the stylistic, and compared to other documents from the fascist era. And basically they concluded they were real, or they were a forgery done in the 30s, because the chemical analysis, all that, dated to that era. And basically what it would have been, if this is true, is that there was a rash of sightings beginning in the early 30s in Italy. Of course, you've had sightings in Scandinavia too, of the mystery airplane, so that by itself is not so different. What is different on this case is that it would have created the very first government investigation ever on this phenomenon. So Mussolini, through his brother, son-in-law, Count Ciano, who was the foreign minister of the fascist regime, they created a cabinet, a special group called Cabinet something like 33-S. And supposedly they put the famous, world's famous scientist Marconi in charge of it. And this cabinet, of course it was a dictatorship, so they controlled the media and all that, but in case something was seen widely, they even had instructions to publish like cover stories, like if something was seen okay, let's say it's a meteorite or something like that. Now what's interesting too is that on the early documents, and these were a bunch of sightings and drawings and everything, they didn't think that they were alien. They thought it which was probably in the early days of the American investigation too, or the Russian investigation, they thought it was their enemies, they were British or French.
What were the craft described as?
Some were cigar-shaped. They call them something like, they use a cute term like unconventional aeromobiles or something, because obviously there was no term, flying saucer.
Were they doing anything?
Yeah, they were, not that I know shooting or attacking people, but they were flying around. And they seemed definitely structured. That's why they thought there was some kind of weapon that the other countries had. They knew it wasn't Italian or German, because they were allies with the German, so they had to be British or French. But obviously they couldn't prove this after a while. I guess they realized it wasn't British or French. And then there's this strange speech that Mussolini gave in 1943, I believe, to some fascist workers' union or something, and it was reported in the Italian press, where he said that the next war won't be between countries, but between the Earth and some flying fortresses from Mars or something like that. And people at the time didn't know what the heck Mussolini was talking about. But now,
well, this is a great, mysterious craft and occupants and all sorts of things have been going on. Of course, Charles Fort wrote this, but there's even so much, now, I mean, that
no,
you
all
could
the time.
amaze, yeah.
Only recently, and I had published some of this in the oral articles for your magazines as well, but I'm just putting on the web now some new articles on the openminds.tv web, and about cases historical cases in China. And some of them are even by well-known writers and philosophers and people like that. I mean, of course, they probably don't know them, but if you read the history of Chinese literature, whatever, these are known people. They are not like obscure people. There were famous scholars in the 1200s or the 1600s. So yes, there is phenomena all over history too. Of course, we're just talking about the paintings, the European paintings. Yes. Recently, when I was in Mexico, they showed me a painting from colonial times, which I've never seen. We've all seen the Italian ones, or some in Spain or whatever, but this one is in Mexico, like from the Baroque, from colonial periods. And it looked like, I'm waiting to get a better copy of it, and it looked like, again, like another kind of luminous phenomenon. And here you see the Virgin Mary and Jesus in the heavens, surrounded by angels or whatever, and here you see like some kind of yellowish object going through. Because I think that what happened in historical times is that what outlet would these visions have, right? So they would put them in religious paintings because they probably interpret them as an omen or a sign of God or something like that.
So what does this tell us? I mean, let's break down the phenomena now. When I started this, investigation, this would have been in the early 60s, I was convinced, because of probably of what I had read, UFOs were interplanetary. They had to be from some other planet. Because we certainly didn't have the amount of data that we have now. That this is historical and it's global. Doesn't it seem kind of unreasonable that these objects would be? I mean, okay, you have sightings here and there. So, but this has been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Right.
Why? First of all, if they were aliens, why would they be making so many trips, and where do they go?
I know. I think that you have my own. I'm not a theory man, but I mean, after over 30 years, of course, I have some ideas. First of all, I think that there's a multiplicity of explanations. So that's why, in part, I saw ufologists fighting it really hard, like the whatever the dimensional ones versus the ET ones. And then I said, and then what I realized too is that once you have a very formed theory, the phenomenon is so vast and amorphous in a way that you will interpret those aspects of the phenomenon that suits your theory.
Yes.
So you'll find certain types of case because they look like ET, right? Or the other guy, they look like dimensional or whatever. So I kind of stay with them. But I think there's probably multiple explanations. Some may be extraterrestrial, probably, could be. But most probably not, I agree. I think it's something closer to our environment, whether it's that there are multiple dimensions or something like that. Because, and there's so many of them, yet they're not invading or anything like that, that we...
Yes, right. Have you ever seen a UFO?
Yeah, I've seen some UFOs, but nothing at close range. But I did see about 3 times. Well, recently in Mexico City, actually there were UFO sightings, and I saw them. If I had read the accounts, I probably would have said it's bullshit, just hype for the conference or whatever. But I saw with my own eyes. It wasn't a very spectacular thing, but of course we had this guy who's sort of the big contactee of the moment now, Antonio Huneeus. No, the Italian guy.
Yeah. But he brings him in.
He brings him in. I saw with my own eyes. When you see his footage, some of his footage is very metallic and close by.
Was this the one he took some outside of his bathroom window or something? Oh, they don't,
I know. They look, but these were totally different. I mean, first of all, there were plenty of other people. They were very high in the sky, like a little point of light, but they were daytime. And Alejandro Rojas from our company, he even got it on tape. And I wrote an article in our website. So that was my latest sighting. But prior to that, although that could have even been a balloon. I'm not saying it was necessary.
Because I know a lot of the sightings in Mexico, they said balloons, the planet Venus, or...
Right. I think there's too many sightings in Mexico. And so you need to filter them.
Well, yeah.
There's
Well,
still
yeah.
many that are
Well,
fascinating.
you know, people think that the sightings in Mexico is a recent, occurrence. But I remember a book called Flying Saucer Pilgrimage that was written in 1956 or something like that. And Adamski made his first trip to Mexico to lecture, and there was a fellow that escorted him around throughout his tour there, who was a chauffeur.
I remember that
Yeah,
story.
yeah, and
I
the
forgot his name right now.
but the chauffeur was
was
a contactee.
Well, Tim, when would you think it was the first Mexican UFO wave? This is a little bit quick.
Now, wasn't there an astronomer who took a photo over the moon? I'm good at this. Sharp.
It's funny. That was the Zacatecas Observatory. No, okay, that's a real case. You're doing better than most people. Most people say the 90s with the big eclipse. No, that's not the first one. Actually, I have a big article coming on the next issue of Open Minds. If you read all the historical books of the conquest of
I've
America,
always wanted to do that.
Well, you need a lot of patience, right?
Yeah.
If you actually read this book,
I like books on torture.
you don't have to read the whole book. You can go through the chapter.
Yeah.
They don't call them UFOs, obviously. They call them omens.
Yeah.
And the empire of Montezuma,
Yes.
for a period of about 10 years, was flooded with weird appearances. All kinds of things. Lights in the sky, weird phenomena, monsters, whatever. And so later they were seen as presages, omens of the fall of the Aztec Empire and the coming of the Spanish. Some of the cases are truly fascinating. There's one where some fishermen find a bird in the lagoon there, because Mexico City was like Venice in those days. Remember, it was all mostly water. And but it was not a normal bird. Obviously, it did not have a head. Instead of a head, it had a mirror on the head. So they bring it to Montezuma himself, and he's looking at it, and he sees the Pleiades on the mirror, and then he sees like a marching army, which is the Spanish, coming to basically conquer him. So then he moves it to his astrologers or whatever, his scientists, whatever they were, and then the bird takes off. So what was this? Was some kind of mechanical device or was some supernatural phenomenon? Yet all these cases are mentioned in the chronicles. There's another case of a peasant who gets literally abducted by an eagle. An eagle grabs him, but takes him to a cave and talks to him. And this is published in books in the 1600s. A talking eagle? I mean, you see all these abductees with talking owls and things like that. So I think that there was a UFO wave there that took place in between 1510 and 1520. The Spanish Cortes came in 1519. And I think it also has a message. Not that I'm not a negative person at all, but I'm not a naive either believer in aliens going to save our world. Because here, what happened in the Spanish there too is that, the Indians, the Mexicans, they had these prophecies about the return of Quetzalcoatl, which was sort of their avatar or whatever. And so when the Spanish came, they first thought they were the Quetzalcoatl. They treated Cortés like a god, and obviously it turned out to be a false god. So I think there's a message there for a lot of people that think that aliens are wonderful and going to save the planet or whatever. I mean, we recently had all this brouhaha over Stephen Hawking,
Yes.
I'm not saying he's right, but if we look at also the history of our own planet, when some more advanced culture does come into contact with a less advanced culture, I'm talking advanced technologically, not necessarily mentally. It could be problems.
Well, and Antonio, I must admit, I'm very impressed. You're a walking encyclopedia of the subject. I thought I knew a lot, but you've got it down. You ever think there's going to be disclosure?
I don't think in the dramatic disclosure. I think disclosure is a very, like they had that saying, death by 1,000 cuts or something, which we're seeing. It's been happening already for years, but it's a very slow process. Unless the aliens themselves force the issue. They could force it yesterday if they wanted.
Be a knock on the door.
But they don't. So, I don't know. No, I'm not a big believer in the dramatic disclosure. But if you look at the current generations, and you ask them about aliens, they think it's perfectly natural. They don't have all these, hang-ups that our generation had about the issue. I think that there have been so many, not only UFO material, but also science fiction and Hollywood movies and
You think
video games.
You
with
think
aliens.
any of the governments know?
I think the governments, some governments, the major governments, have a lot of data in maybe probably even pieces of objects or whatever, maybe even dead aliens, who knows? But I don't think they have the complete picture. That's why if they completely knew everything, maybe they would have released it. But if they don't, if they only know these things are real, but they don't know the basic questions, why are they coming here, then they wouldn't release it.
Well,
that used to be Hynek's opinion, the late Dr. Hynek. He said that it was that was the reason of the cover-up. It was like because the government, it's like a father, right? It's supposed to have all the answers, and for them to come to the public saying, "Oh yeah, we know these things are real, but first of all, we cannot control them, and second, we don't know really what is their goal."
If there is disclosure, where do you think it will come from? Outside of the
if there is, I think it's almost more likely to be outside of the United States.
Mexico?
Well, Mexico, but the weird thing about Mexico is like the government has done practically nothing in Mexico. In fact, I recently saw Jaime at this thing in LA, Jaime Maussan, and they asked him about the Mexican Air Force, and he said that practically it doesn't exist in Mexico. There's practically no Mexican Air Force. There was that one video, remember?
That's right, that was the Mexican Air Force.
Yeah, that was it. But that was even a project financed by us for drug interdiction.
That's right, You can see how well that worked.
Yeah. Not very well, I guess. That was in 2004 or something. No, I don't think it would be Mexico. More likely would be, I don't know, it could be Russia, it could be any country, I guess. But I mean, you have France, you have serious countries that have released a lot of documentation.
Well, I want to thank you for your time today. This has been one of the most interesting interviews because this is something I'm kind of into the international aspect of this. In fact, back in the
whole world out there.
Back in the 1960s. Back in the 1960s, I had published a book, UFOs Around the World, and that was the first. Actually, I think the first.
I remember that one. That was a good one.
But the Jacques Vallée had a chapter in there, and there were articles, in fact, from China. There was so we kind of been onto that, for quite a while.
Well, what's completely changed now, the international perspective and the research is, of course, the internet. Because in the old days, it was very hard. You either had to travel, or you had to have extensive contacts, or correspondence with people.
A big budget like UFO Universe had.
Right, right. But now, with the internet, it's amazing. You can instantly, I mean, if the UFO seen in Malaysia, it'll be in YouTube the next day, You can contact people by email, by Facebook, by all these things almost immediately. It's completely changed the way you do research, especially on the international.
I think before we close here, I understand that the Open Mind, the organization that you work for, and we were at their offices today, very impressed by this. They are going to be promoting the UFO Congress for the first time next year.
Do we have a copy of the magazine here, by the way? It would be nice to show it on the maybe it's on one of the bags.
Our staff here will staff.
Probably.
No, I don't think I have one in there. You have one.
I left mine in my car.
We'll
maybe you can add it later.
We'll add it.
Okay.
We'll add put a minute on the end here. We'll show you the website and.
Great, thanks, Tim. Well, Open Minds, of course, we are doing every kind of media. We have a magazine, which is a wonderful looking magazine, which is bi-monthly. We have, of course, a big website at openminds.tv, so it's really easy to go. We have the radio program, Open Minds Radio, which Alejandro Rojas does. And, we have the TV programs, although that will come later. But some little TV fragments are on the website now.
No, the radio program is actually...
That you can see on live streaming.
Yes. So that is, to me, it's TV.
It's a way of TV, but we have Tom Ruffin, who's a professional, used to work for Paramount. And he's very perfectionist, in all the camera work and all multiple cameras and all that. So I think eventually the programs will be very good. But right now, we're still in the early stages. But then the final leg of our operation is that we took over basically the International UFO Congress that used to be in Laughlin. actually what most people don't realize that it didn't start in Nevada, it started in Arizona. It started by Wendell Stevens in Tucson.
Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, I stayed at the hotel just there the other night.
There you go. It's a small world. This is, I think it's a brochure, but that would be good enough.
Yeah.
So this is the cover of our first issue. And like I mentioned, the second issue will have the Vatican. And here we have the thing for the conference. So we're moving the conference to Arizona, to an Indian reservation in Fort McDowell, which is only half an hour away from Phoenix. So it'll be much easier for people now to fly, because that was the one criticism of Laughlin, that you had to fly to Las Vegas and then take like an hour and a half shuttle or something. Now we're only half an hour shuttle. And it's a very nice place. It's still a casino, so that tradition even continues. But it has a separate conference room. A lot of people used to complain in Laughlin about the cigarette smoke. Here, however, you have it on a different building. Smokers will still be happy because they can go to the next building and smoke or outside, but the non-smokers, and believe me, I've heard a lot of people, I mean, you know how fickle people are.
Yeah. Smoking has.
Yeah. So I think it's going to be great, and it will.
Have anybody lined up to speak so far?
Well, we're working on it. It will be on February 16th through the 20th. Yeah, we have a lot of nobody's been officially invited yet, so I'd rather not say names, but we'll have a lot of names that people.
It's going to run how many days?
Well, Laughlin used to go almost for 8 days or 9 days, which is way too much. Ours is going to begin on Wednesday, I think Wednesday afternoon, and it will go all the way through Sunday.
That's still a lot.
Oh, it's still a very long
conference. We should start on Friday and end on Monday. The last person passed out.
Right. Yeah, most conferences only do it 2 days, 3 days at the most. But so that would give us a lot of visibility, obviously, when we do this conference. And Phoenix, as you know, has become it's almost like a center of ufology now.
Yes,
even
that's
before
true.
us.
Arizona,
Arizona. Arizona, New Mexico. Of course, we had the Phoenix Lights, and we had the governor who really killed it back then, and now you've got to get him to be the MC. We will. As a matter of fact, we're working on that, and we're working on it. We want to, besides all the well-known researchers, we also want to have like a couple of celebrities if we can. You know.
Dan Aykroyd.
Yeah, someone like him, or a rock star, or a politician who's not running for office.
There go his chances. Yes,
but
that'll make the 6 o'clock news. Yes.
Yeah, if we can get, or maybe a Russian cosmonaut, whatever, wherever we can get. So we can get some press too.
Didn't one of the Russian cosmonauts who had a UFO sighting pass away recently, right?
Yes, we have the memorial. In fact, it's right here. As a matter of fact,
I knew I read it somewhere.
Yeah. General Pavel Popovich.
Yeah. Was he related to?
Yeah, he was the husband of Marina.
Well, they both went into space then. She went into space?
No, she never went into space. She was a test pilot, and she was qualified as a cosmonaut, but she never actually went to space.
But he had a UFO sighting, yes.
He did. He had a UFO sighting, but not in space. He had a UFO sighting flying between Washington and Moscow.
Yes.
On an airplane. But he was a cosmonaut, the general of the Soviet Union, a hero of the Soviet Union, all these kinds of titles. And he lent his prestige. At one time, he was even the head of this association of various scientific groups that were attached to the Academy of Sciences. Because in the Soviet days, the one way you could do ufology in Russia, you had to be very scientific. If you were like, connected to an academy or something like that, then you would kind of get away with it. And so they had him as a leader for some years, and he was the first one who obtained a number of documents from the KGB on UFOs. After the fall of the Soviet Union, when a lot of things were happening there, yes, he obtained a file of about 100 documents from the KGB. Later, George Knapp and other people obtained more, but he was the first one. So yeah, he was a prominent guy. But he was not the only one. There were about 2 or 3 others, more. Actually, I have a piece on Russian cosmonauts in the website, in our Open Minds website, where I go through the whole list. And there were many that had sightings. And oddly enough, when it comes to UFOs, Russian cosmonauts are on record more open-minded and more
Yeah.
than the American astronauts. American astronauts, as you know, they're very difficult on the subject. There are some exceptions, of course. Gordon Cooper was the most famous, and Edgar Mitchell more recently.
Yeah.
And maybe a couple of others that have seen something or admitted to something, but the rest of it don't want to deal with it. But the Russians seem to be more open-minded about it.
Now, looking back, how many years now since you...
I started in 1977, so it's 33 years.
Are you glad you got into this?
Yeah, now I am. Now I am. I mean, I've had my ups and downs. There were periods where I kind of regretted it even.
Yes.
But since I took a vacation, which we were talking at the beginning of this interview, and because also, as you know, I'm sure it happened to you too, and I know you've done
burnout.
Other movies.
Burnout.
You get burnt out.
Yeah.
You get at one point you even get tired of the stories.
Yes,
You've heard them all.
Yeah.
You get jaded. So I took a few years off. Literally, I kept a little contact, but not much. And now everything is kind of new again. So that's exciting.
Well, let's conclude again with the website.
Yeah, so the website is basically open, after the www.openminds.tv.
Yeah.
It's really simple. And once you get there, well, it's pretty self-explanatory. I mean, you can go to
and the magazine is...
The magazine is Open Minds magazine, which you can find on any of the Barnes & Nobles or Borders. Or you can subscribe or buy it in our website as well. And then the radio... If you live in Phoenix, you can listen to the radio live. But if you don't, then you go through our website.
And I must say, the program is impressive. Wendell Stevens has been on.
Oh, yeah.
Our buddy Jim Delatoso, who's seen a UFO photo, he didn't like.
We even had this scientist, Paul Davids, that we were talking before, the guy with the Hillary book and all that. He was in our program. And we've had many people, of course, we've appeared there too.
And your host is, he does a very good...
Alejandro is an easygoing guy, so he gets along with everybody. He used to be with MUFON. He was the director of information and education for MUFON. So it's a good show every Monday, and now it's at from 9 to 10. West Coast, of course, so it will be much later, but we're basically right before Coast to Coast. So people don't want to stay up. And you don't have to stay all night. You can check it out on the next day.
That's the one amazing thing about the internet.
Yeah.
It never goes, whatever you say never goes away.
And unlike Coast to Coast, we don't charge anything. Because in Coast to Coast you have to pay like a monthly fee, and then you have access, ours is free. And you can go and watch any show you want.
Well, I want to thank you, Antonio.
Pleasure to see you again.
My friend from the hood in New York. Many a night had Indian food and went out for a drink. Go to the Open Mind website, and don't forget to go to ours. Tim Beckley again reporting for the conspiracyjournal.com. And remember, I can see you, but you can't see me.
I can see you.